The chilling backstories of these innocent-looking photos dramatically change the 1,000 words that they would otherwise paint. There's always more than meets the eye. Number 5. At first glance, this eerie photo of an abandoned cabin doesn't look all that sinister. The abandoned wooden building stands in front of a forested area in an overgrown grassland, but the building is one of the few remaining remnants of the town of Portlock, a supposedly haunted ghost town in Alaska. Portlock was settled in the 1780s and lies on the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. It's extremely remote and difficult to get to today. It would have been even more isolated when it was settled. When exactly the creepy occurrences began is hard to pin down. Native people had always heard stories of the Nantina, a half-man, half-beast creature. But it was in the early 1900s that the reports of the mysterious goings-on in the town of Portlock began to be recorded. The town was mostly supported by a cannery and a chromium mine. In 1905, all the workers at the cannery camp left due to some unspecified mysterious event. When they returned the following year, the events continued. What followed was 45 years of strange happenings in the small, isolated town. How many of the stories are real and how many are just urban legends is impossible to say. Some stories are more outlandish than others. One tells that a group of cannery workers went on a walk into the woods and all disappeared. Another tells of hunters finding 18-foot-long footprints stalking a moose that they were also hunting. They then came across a grisly scene where this mysterious creature apparently attacked the moose, but the moose itself was nowhere to be seen. Other reports are more specific. One story is of a man named Andrew whose body was found at some point in 1931. He'd been struck with a blow too heavy to have come from a human. Other bodies were found with marks that didn't match those from bear attacks. In 1945, most of the people left Portlock and moved to neighboring villages. They took with them stories of strange happenings, including the mysterious Bigfoot-like creature and a phantom woman that resembled the typical ghost of the woman in black. Only the postmaster stayed behind, but he too left the town in 1950. Today, Portlock, Alaska is a ghost town where many still fear to go. What makes Portlock so different from other abandoned towns is the fact that there are still people who grew up there that are alive today, who shared their own creepy first-hand accounts of the strange happenings in the town. We still don't know what drove the owner of this cabin to abandon Portlock, and whether or not any mysterious creatures still lurk there today. Number 4. Plenty of photos taken by divers of long-lost shipwrecks can have an eerie quality, but photos of the RMS Roan became even more disturbing once you know the backstory behind the ship's sinking. The RMS Roan was once one of the most luxurious steamships in the open sea. It had a 6-foot bronze propeller, only the second ever created for use on a ship, and it boasted 253 first-class cabins. It was something like the Titanic of its time, complete with claims of being unsinkable. Its maiden voyage took place in 1865, traveling from Southampton to Rio de Janeiro. For the next 2 years, it would travel between the UK, South America, and the Caribbean before its final voyage in October of 1967. It was 2 days before Halloween when the tragedy occurred. Roan and another ship, the RMS Conway, were refueling on Peter Island in the British Virgin Islands. Normally, the refueling would take place on a different island, but a disease outbreak had forced ships to go to a temporary refueling station. While there, the ship's sensors indicated that a massive storm was on its way. The two captains believed it was an early winter storm. They thought it was too late in the season for it to be a hurricane, but tragically, they would be wrong. A Category 3 hurricane struck the island. At first, the two ships managed to weather the storm, but in a brief calm period, the captains decided it was better to move. Because the RMS Roan was more experienced and had weathered storms before, the passengers from the Conway were transferred into the Roan. The Conway managed to escape to Tortola Island, but the Roan wasn't so lucky. Her anchor had gotten tangled in a coral reef and couldn't be removed. The sailors were eventually forced to cut the line and set sail for open water. While just a few hundred yards from the open water, the Roan left the eye of the storm. With no way of stabilizing the ship, it was thrown into the Black Rock Point on nearby Salt Island. The ship was torn in two and quickly sank. Only 23 people survived. Most of the Roan's passengers were tied to their bunks, as was standard practice at the time, and had no chance of survival. The passengers from the Conway may have been more lucky, but it's believed all of the survivors were actually crew members who would have been above the deck. This photo is of the Lucky porthole. When the wreck was discovered, the porthole's glass was still completely intact. Now its bronze frame still shines as divers are encouraged to rub it for good luck. But it's not only the wreck that divers have found there. There are countless stories of divers finding other swimmers around Roan's wreck. The mysterious swimmers aren't wearing diving gear and seem to be struggling in the water. When approached, the swimmers disappear. Number 3. Maurice and Katia Kraft dedicated their careers to recording and capturing images in some of the most dangerous places in the world, active volcanoes. The volcanologist captured countless hours of footage from volcanic hotspots, but it would be a seemingly ordinary photo that remains the most chilling. The French couple met at university in the 1960s. Even today, there are relatively few women in the field of volcanology, and that was even more the case back then. Maurice and Katia bonded over a love of the subject and shared dreams of traveling the world and recording their work. Almost immediately after graduating, they started doing just that. At first, they focused on effusive eruptions, the relatively calm kind of eruption that consists mostly of lava flow. These are the safer kind of volcanic eruption, as lava flow is typically slower than a human's walking speed, and is typically predictable. But the footage produced was terrifying, with the couple inches away from scorching hot substances. Later in their careers, they turned their focus to the more dramatic, volatile eruptions, which were much more dangerous. They wanted their footage to not only teach people about volcanoes for an academic purpose, but they wanted to help save lives. As well as images of terrifying pyroclastic flows and spectacular lava streams, the images showed warning signs that people and governments could use to predict a devastating eruption. Unfortunately for the couple, not even their experience could have predicted what happened in Japan in 1991. In May of 1991, Mount Unzen in Japan began to erupt. The volcano had been active since the year before, with seismic activity building up for decades. In the 1991 eruption, it built lava domes, which are extremely unpredictable. And for the first time, it started to release pyroclastic flows. This was the first time such flows were captured on camera, and naturally, the Crafts wanted to be there to film them. On June 3rd, the couple and 41 others traveled to a plateau where they believed it would be safe to film. This final eerie photo of Katia Kraft was taken shortly before they left. Not long after the group arrived at the plateau, a pyroclastic flow rolled over it, and all 43 were lost. Number 2. At first glance, this photo might look like someone trying multiple paths to get down a mountain. In reality, it shows the last steps of one of the most innovative and accomplished mountaineers. Hermann Bull was an Austrian mountaineer who, in 1953, became the first person to summit Nanga Parbat, a mountain on the western end of the Himalayas. 31 people had already lost their lives trying to climb the mountain, and Bull managed to summit the mountain solo. It was extremely dangerous. He left the other climbers on his expedition at Camp 5 in the early hours of July 3, 1953. After 17 hours of climbing, crawling, and taking medication to keep himself conscious, Bull finally reached the summit. He had left behind his poles and many of the tools that he would need to get back down. It was also dark by this point, and returning to the camp so late would be extremely dangerous. As soon as it was light again, Bull began his descent. At 7 p.m., 24 hours after reaching the summit, and 41 hours after leaving his fellow climbers, Bull reached Camp 5. He was exhausted, had frostbite on his toes, and was somewhat delirious. His fellow climbers had been planning a rescue mission when he arrived and didn't expect to find him alive. The solo climb solidified Bull's place in the history books, but it wouldn't be his final climb. 4 years later, Bull was part of a team that managed the first ascent of the Broad Peak Mountain, but he already had his eye on the next challenge. Kogalasa was at that point unsummited. Bull and fellow climber Colt Diemberger set off a few weeks later to try to change that. Things started off well for the two climbers, but a sudden snowstorm meant that they were forced to turn back. Bull may have done the almost impossible in the past, but this was not something he would have been able to survive. The two climbers weren't tied together as they made their way down the mountain. Diemberger was walking ahead when a cornice suddenly fell away. A cornice is an overhang of snow that might look solid, but can be very dangerous to walk on. For some reason, Bull had strayed from the path Diemberger was following and over the cornice. He dislodged the snow and a small avalanche followed. Bull was lost, but his body was never recovered. Diemberger survived his climb down the mountain and took this photo. 2 paths in the snow, one leading back to life. While not too mysterious, the eerie image becomes that much creepier, knowing Diemberger was also just a few feet away from the disaster. Number 1. The painting Minovia, hanging in a gallery in the National Museum of Fine Arts in the Philippines, doesn't look too out of the ordinary. The painting is sometimes called a portrait of a woman, and it's just that. A woman with pale skin and European features lies in bed, clutching a rosary with the Bible on the bed beside her. But the painting has a dark story behind it, and legend says it's cursed. The painting was created by Juan Luna sometime in the 1880s. Luna was a Filipino painter living in Paris at the time. He had already won awards for his earlier paintings, but wasn't at a point in his career where he could support himself and his family with his artwork. This was unfortunate, as he was married to a woman named Maria de la Paz Pardo de Tavera. Paz had grown up in Paris, but her family was also from the Philippines. They were of Spanish nobility, living in self-exile in France. They were wealthy, and Paz was adored by her parents. Luna was friends with one of Paz's brothers first. He seemed to make such a good impression that the family allowed him to marry Paz in 1886. The marriage started out well and they had a son together, but things quickly went downhill. Luna's inability to support his family financially and his natural hot-headedness led to arguments between the couple. Luna was also convinced that his wife was cheating on him. The arguments escalated and Paz left the family home at some point. On September 22, 1892, Luna broke into the home where his wife was staying and attacked Paz and his mother-in-law. Paz's mother passed away at the scene, and Paz later passed away at the hospital. Minovia was originally believed to be a painting of Paz, although the woman in the painting doesn't physically resemble Luna's wife. Her fair skin and European features don't match Paz's. Some experts believe Luna created an idealized version of his wife, using a model he was fond of. Whoever the woman in the painting is supposed to be, that hasn't deterred rumors that the portrait is cursed. The first victim of the portrait, Manuel Garcia, went from being a successful businessman to bankrupt relatively quickly after acquiring the artwork. Another victim, Betty Bentag Benitez, passed away in a road accident not long after she bought the painting. Tony Nazareno was hit with a sudden illness when he came into possession of Minovia. The painting has even been blamed for the downfall of the Marcos family. Imelda Marcos donated the artwork to the National Museum in the Philippines, where it remains today. The curse has supposedly even continued at the museum. When the painting was unveiled, the spotlight shining onto it burst. All the other lights in the room were fine. Since then, the curse doesn't seem to have struck again. Whether or not you believe in the curse, the creepy story that took place when this painting was made gives it an eerie feeling. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.